morning. Welcome to day 3 at the Milken Institute Global Conference. My name is Paul Irving. I chair the Center for the Future of Aging at the Institute, and it's a pleasure to have all of you with us. And it's also my great pleasure to have a terrific panel of experts for our session on retirement. The title of our session is Retirement is Extinct, but I think maybe what we'll do is change it to what is the future of retirement, with a particular focus in this group in the United States, but certainly some of the things that we'll talk about are relevant to other societies and to kind of the broader question of what should later life look like. So joining us today, maybe let me start on my left, Penny Peddington.
Hi, y'all.
And Penny is the I guess your title is managing partner, but effectively you're the CEO of Edward Jones, as many of you know, the large securities and investment firm. Next to Penny is Kathleen Kennedy Townsend, our pal. Welcome, Kathleen. On my right, Teresa Ghilarducci from the New School, and on my far right, our very good friend and longtime Milken Institute participant, Art Bilger, who's the founder of, among other things, Working Nation, that I'm sure he'll talk a little bit about later. So we have a complex series of topics to cover today, and they're complex for a range of reasons, but let me just kind of identify maybe 2 big buckets for you to think about. One is, what should retirement look like? What does it mean? And is the definition of retirement, which if you look it up in Webster's, you'll see things like decline and removal and disengagement. Is that an appealing vision for the last quarter or third of our longer lives? As bioscience has done its work in extending the possibility of longer life, are we doing all we can to realize the blessings that science has provided us? But at the same time, we have the question of affordability. Does this notion of a different kind of retirement present a reality for most of our fellow citizens, and what are the challenges in realizing that? So maybe before I start, I'm going to ask each one of our panels. Let me just read a little snippet from a recent piece in the Wall Street Journal. This really kind of goes to the initial point. So the statement was, in our rush to leave the office, we don't realize that retirement also has a downside, especially over the long term. Many retirees indulge in unhealthy behaviors. They become sedentary and watch too much television. They eat too much. They drink too much. They smoke too much. Without the purpose of a fulfilling life, retirees can feel adrift and become depressed. Without the camaraderie of their coworkers, retirees risk becoming socially isolated. Without the intellectual stimulation that work can provide, retirement can accelerate cognitive decline. So before we talk about this question of affordability, let's paint what could be maybe a different picture of retirement, maybe a more appealing picture. Maybe, Penny, if we can start with you, what should retirement look like as we go forward?
Well, I'll answer that channeling 7 million clients at Edward Jones. So those of you who may not know a lot about Edward Jones, just very briefly, we're a firm that helps people achieve financially whatever it is that's important to them. We've been doing that for 97 years, since 1922. And today we have 7 million clients in whose kitchens and living rooms we sit. They allow us to care for $1 trillion of their assets, and many of those clients have as one of their ultimate goals that they're working with our financial advisors on an ultimate dignified retirement of their choosing, one where they are able to have agency over their own lives and determine what they're going to do in retirement, who they're going to do it with, where they're going to do it. It's all a matter of choice, and what we help them with is to try to discover deeply and very personally what retirement means for them. We believe that every single one of their retirement scripts is likely to be different. So we seek not to impose a script on them, but to really understand what is most meaningful to them. And I think very broadly, because every one of those scripts is hyper-personalized. Some of them probably do look like Broadway plays. Some of them might look a little more like Chekhov's short stories. But we're searching for whatever it is that drives them to help them to achieve that. And from a financial standpoint, from a money standpoint, and from a mindset standpoint, I think what we all desire at every stage and age of our life is choices, optionality. So creating that through the tools that we have available to us at Edward Jones is how we help people build their futures in that way.
Kathleen, what about you? We've talked about the fact that rich and poor, black and white, men and women, in many ways, we come at this from kind of different perspectives, and certainly with different resources, different educations, and all the rest. But somehow there's this common ground. So what do you see as the potential for a better retirement for the future?
Well, I think what everybody wants is a sense of purpose and of a peace of mind, and that they have friends and family close to them, or at least on call, and that they can make a contribution in their community. What we've seen is that seniors who get to volunteer, and especially volunteer with younger people, do better than anybody else because they're young. I see my mother who's 91, and all her friends are younger than I am, which is really young. And that's what keeps people alive. So they volunteer, or they take classes because they want to learn something new, or they travel. And that's really lucky, and she's been lucky. So that's true of those who are well off. And obviously, for a large part of our population, they have to worry about money. And one of the things that, when I look at what we should do with retirement, is to make sure that all Americans can live with a peace of mind and don't have to worry about the money part, which we'll get into later. But really, so many people have talents. So many people have so much to offer. And if you give them the opportunity, they'll take it. And that's what we need to create for our country. Give something back. And if they do, they're much happier.
And we're going to talk a little bit about how we get this conversation to a higher level in our political discourse a bit later. But Teresa, what about you? You think about this at a population level. What are these kind of common characteristics that we all seek?
There's great research now about the health and well-being of people in retirement. And there's a lot of differences. And it's important to have fact-based conclusions. It turns out that for a significant number of people who are having to work after age 62, 63, that work is actually eroding their health and their well-being. It's because many people without sufficient retirement assets are in very low-paid gig work. The data shows from the health and retirement surveys that for women who are in service work after 65 actually increases their morbidity. There are certainly many people in this room and our income group who can voluntarily retire or not, and who can control the pace and content of their time. And if you look at all the job characteristics from the Department of Labor matched to an occupational title, it's the sense of being able to set your own time, set your own content, that actually brings joy and well-being to work after 65. If you can't do that, then you are doing a lot of intense concentration. You're bending and stooping, a lot more physical labor. And I think that is behind the reason why we are reversing our longevity gains.
Longevity, yeah. So Art Bilger, I remember when you started Working Nation, as I recall, you did a bulk purchase of a book, and maybe that was one of the drivers. Do you want to talk about what you've spent a lot of time traveling the country over the last couple of years, talking about the future of work, and very much thinking about this intersection between age and work. What do you see as this kind of aspiration for the latter part of our lives?
Well, going back to your reference about the book, Working Nation is a not-for-profit media enterprise that I created to basically educate the people of this country as to, one, what is the most critical issue facing our nation, at least in my mind, and that is a potential massive structural unemployment. And then, but the central mission is to then highlight where the jobs of the future will be and mitigating strategies and solutions. We've got journalists and we've got TV producers, Academy Award-winning documentarians, and we launched 2.5 years ago. So our focus isn't just on older workers, but clearly we have focused on older workers. What really got us there is we found ourselves in the middle of the Carrier Corporation situation when Donald Trump elevated it to all of our view, and my team ran off there to try to help these workers. And these were people, not 60-something years old, 48 and 50, et cetera, and came away quite surprised that these people, at least at that moment, were more comfortable with the idea of being unemployed than being re-educated and re-skilled. And so I do believe one of the greatest challenges as we talk about retirement is this whole area of how do you help people move into these areas. And going back to the word purpose was used earlier, that has been a major theme of ours, Working Nation, because I thought about my own life, and I thought about just put aside dollars and cents, just the things I did and how motivating it was, and then thought about the assembly line worker. And ultimately concluded they too were showing up and working with friends and part of a community, producing, bringing home income, et cetera. And then to Paul's reference, a woman shows up on my doorstep with a book, and if you haven't read it, please read it. Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning. It's on the Library of Congress's, I think, 10 most influential books ever published. And it's all about the importance of meaning in life and a psychological theory that he developed, having been in 3 concentration camps, having watched those who survived and who didn't. And that really got me onto this whole purpose in life thing. And when we now focus on older workers and retirement, the mechanisms to engage people such that they do continue to have meaning in life beyond just showing up for work and making some income, I think is one of the most important things we have to focus on, particularly given the numbers of people who are going into that stage here. This is a major, major issue for the United States.
So if it's not about disengagement and diminishment and removal and irrelevance, and what it is about is purpose and meaning and dignity. We could just stop the panel now, but the problem is there are impediments to achieving that. So let me come back to Teresa. Let's talk about this again, kind of at a population level. I want to ask Penny about some of the experience specifically with some of her clients at Edward Jones. But tell us what we have to do to or at least what our challenges are to get to those aspirational goals.
I really like how you're trying to bring us together to share our values. A civilized society allows people to have the right to retire, to control the pace and content of their life, and the right to work if they want to. Every adult who wants to work should have a job. I would like slide 1. No surprise, I'm a professor. You're going to get some numbers.
A little bit of data.
Just a level set. We know it seems like a free lunch that if we don't have enough retirement income, people can just work a little bit longer. You hear it in Europe, you hear it here. You heard it from the Reagan administration when they started cutting Social Security. Let's ban mandatory retirement. We stand apart from the G7 in banning mandatory retirement and setting forth this idea we should be protected from age discrimination. That's great. But what did it bring us? This is data from the OECD, and I just looked at the G7 nations because while it's interesting to know what's happening in Finland, Estonia, and Norway, and Morocco, we really have to just look at where the bulk of the people are because policies set in these big nations really do influence everybody else. And the first thing I want you to focus on is the elder poverty rate. The elder poverty rate in the United States is the highest in the G7. If you look at the OECD, we're a little bit lower than Korea and Mexico. This is not we stand apart by tolerating these high levels of poverty, and the definition of poverty is a chronic deprivation. Chronic deprivation, 1 out of 5 of our elders. Well, you might think, well, they just need to work longer in order to get more income to raise themselves above the poverty line. So now I want you to look at the effective retirement age. That's when half of the people are retired, half the people aren't. We are the highest in the G7, even a little bit. We're under Japan for a lot of other reasons, but in everywhere else, our effective retirement age is 65. But the Japanese do live longer, and therefore they're working longer. They gain their retirement time at the end of their lives. In the United States, the most stunning event is the separation in longevity gains. Virtually all the longevity gains and the health at older ages have accrued to the top half of the income distribution, and most of it actually to the top 20%. So they get the income, they get the wealth, they're also getting the time. And my dream is that everybody in America be able to have the chance to live a normal lifespan. We're now seeing some evidence that there's a downturn in longevity gain, and for some people in the United States, the prediction of years left at 65 is actually shrinking. May I have the second slide? Just the last one, just have 2. I'm really proud of these numbers because it took 10 years of research waiting for enough people to die in the sample. I didn't want, it was a great day when I got 4,000. This is from the University of Michigan's Health and Retirement Survey, and it's gold-plated data because we're matching actual people through their lifespan at age 50 beyond. We know their wealth, we know their health, we know the jobs that they're in, we know their transitions, and now we're beginning to collect genetic data. Everybody in the sample now has a swab. So we're able to control for all the factors, and we had this hypothesis that because of the erosion in retirement security in our country, and that the 401k plan has worked for some and not others, and because the tax policy really gives benefit to the top 20%, that people who live less long, higher mortality, are the very people who don't have enough retirement income, and they're trying to work longer. And the people who are gaining their years of life, actually have enough wealth to either retire or not. And finally, last year, I had enough people in the sample to look at their wealth and look at their lifespan. And I always get emotional when I see these numbers, and they're all significant, that if you're in the lower third of our society, you have, if you're a woman, only 15.9 years of retirement, and the numbers aren't here, but a third of that time is spent sick. You're not controlling the pace and content of your time because you have a lot of ADLs. You can't walk 900 feet, you can't feed or bathe yourself. But if you're in the top third, you have 20 years of retirement, not a third of your lifetime, just 20 years, and you are healthier. Men's retirement time is a lot less. Men do die sooner, but they're less sick. And again, the class differences are there. And so I want the goal that everybody gets to live a normal human lifespan. And instead of half the people involuntarily being retired, that I have everyone who is retired, voluntarily retired, living at the same standard of living they did when they achieved in retirement, less poverty, and that everybody who wants to work and be renewed by work, no matter what their age, be able to work. So the right to retire and the right to work.
Thank you. So Penny, I'm going to come to your client soon, but I know that Kathleen, I want to ask you. This is going to require change in business. It's going to require change in kind of personal engagement. It's very much going to require change in policy. And I know that one of the things you're hungriest about is how do we get this question of retirement security, let's call it financial security more significantly, the prospects for this large and growing population of people, not just in poverty but in middle class, who, as a result of the risks of health challenges and all the rest, may devolve into poverty ultimately. How do we talk about this in a more public way? How do we
Thank you for
how do we
asking.
get it into the zeitgeist?
Great question. Well, first of all, you can see from the slides we've got a challenge, right? Let's just have the question. Just went from Frank Luntz's presentation. He said you should start every talk with a question. What's the mean savings rate in the United States? Does anybody want to answer that question? Median savings rate? Come on. Zero, right? You know that, zero. And what has that led to? 80% of Americans fear retirement more than they fear death. Did anybody know that?
That's Gallup.
That's a Gallup poll. 80% fear retirement. And why is the median savings rate 50%? Does anybody have an answer? Any other answer? Okay, I'll give you another answer. It's better to have audience participation. I believe in democracy. I think you can't just have me entertain you. You have to think.
You know what? We're not even a half an hour into this, and I've lost control already.
It doesn't matter. I'm the oldest of 11 children. I try to maintain control. It never works. 50% of all businesses don't offer a retirement plan. So therefore, people don't have a place to save because they work at businesses that don't offer a retirement plan. And all the behavioral economists say the easiest place to save is at business. It's done automatically. It's taken out of your paycheck. You don't have to think about it. That's what we want to do. So Teresa and I and Tony James of Blackstone developed a plan. They developed a plan which says you take 1.5% from your salary. If you work for an employer that doesn't offer a plan, you take 1.5% from your salary, match it by your employer. You, the individual employee, gets to decide where that should be invested. It's your money. Nobody can take it. Government can't take it. And when you retire, you get a monthly paycheck for the rest of your life. And that's a plan that's worked in countries around the world, including Australia. And if you make under $40,000 a year, you get a tax credit, so it really doesn't come out of your paycheck. Because the richest, as you know, get a tax deduction, but if you don't have any money, you don't get a tax deduction because you don't have any money to deduct from. So that's the plan. We tested that plan with 4,000 Americans. Now, if you've ever done polling, you know usually you poll 780 people. We tested it, and we found that 77% Republicans and 77% of Democrats and 86% of millennials like this idea. Now, you may question, why do so many millennials like this idea? Why? Does anybody want? I don't know. Well, you can speculate.
They don't think they'll have Social Security because we don't want to work.
They don't want to take care of their parents.
Okay, now.
Are you telling me to move on?
Keep it going.
Okay. The reason the millennials.
I lost control a few minutes ago. Now Kathleen's losing control. All right.
That's okay.
Yeah.
You have to let the people speak.
Yes, you do.
Anyway, the reason the millennials like it so much is because they see that their parents haven't been able to retire, and they are in the gig economy that doesn't offer retirement plans. They want a plan that is portable across businesses, across state lines, that is easy to implement, and will give them retirement security when they retire. And when I went to a class and said it was 1.5%, I've gone to so many college campuses to talk about this. When I went to a class and said it's 1.5% and 1.5%, and they said, in unison, that's not enough. You have to make us save 5%. So.
And
Can I end it there?
That's not
Yeah,
quite
Yes.
absolutely. Although I want to come back on this question of political speak, right?
Okay.
But So we might think that the challenges are only challenges for those A, in poverty, or B, those in middle class who run the risk of frankly degrading as a result of health expense and the like. But kind of the anxieties, the confusions, the concerns about what retirement will look like. Will retirement be meaningful? Will I be isolated? Will I be alone? Particularly a challenge for women, really exist across class. So, Penny, you've got this kind of spectrum of clients from let's call it reasonably comfortable to very wealthy, and yet you see these kinds of questions across this entire group. Talk a little bit about that.
Absolutely. Everyone has some of some of these similar anxieties, no matter what their resource level was. And we do work with a pretty wide demographic range, notwithstanding some of the data that Teresa is showing us, and it's such important information. There are anxieties about what retirement looks like for everyone, and speaking into the issue of employer retirement plans, they are really important. One of the chief delimiters between a successful and comfortable retirement and not is whether you early on contributed into your employer's retirement plan. Today, there are 60 million Americans who are working who don't have access to an employer's retirement plan. And many of those companies are companies that have 100 or less employees. Now, that is where the growth rate in our economy is today, is in the vitality of new businesses forming, service businesses, product-based business, what have you, but they are smaller businesses. And those businesses are challenged sometimes in developing retirement plans. They're busy growing their businesses. There is some administrative expense to that. And so there are two things that can help with that. Policy can help with that. And there are bills in Congress right now to raise the tax credits for small business owners from $500 administrative expense to $5,000 in administrative expense to help them open these employer retirement plans that are so critical to retirement success. And you mentioned millennials, Kathleen. There's some good news with millennials because they are seeing their parents in whatever stage or age they are with the anxieties and the challenges that they have around retirement. Millennials on average are beginning to save much earlier than the baby boomers, 22 years old versus 35 years old. Savers are saving up to 13 years earlier than those of my generation. Time is one of the most important elements in saving for retirement. So there are three things that I know this sounds odd that are really in the control of folks for a comfortable retirement: time, savings rate, and returns. And I know you'd think, well, how can you possibly control those things? Well, you can start saving early, and small dollars saved early over long periods of time, the magic of compounding, it's sort of like gravity, it's that powerful. That's very, very important. And so those millennials who are becoming educated about this are saying, yeah, my parents told me I ought to save earlier because they didn't, and they're seeing the after effects of that. So we can control time. We can also control our savings rate. And the way you do this is by delaying gratification. And Teresa, you ought to rightly say, Penny, there are some people who are not going to delay this kind of gratification because you're talking about food on the table. That I have a lot of respect for exactly what you're saying there, but there are many, many people in our country who can delay gratification in pursuit of understanding their long lives ahead of them. And if they have purpose around those long lives, there's more reason and meaning in delaying their gratification in order to put some money away. And then the third thing that we can control, and I know this sounds crazy, but we can control returns. And the way that you can control returns is with great diversification, good asset allocation, buying high quality investments, remaining invested and rebalancing those investments. A long perspective, and again, with all due respect, there are some folks who are not able to have such a long perspective. But whatever your perspective is, lengthening your time horizon is a way to control returns. And so when people feel barriers to those three things, and those barriers come from misinformation, one more reason why it's an excellent idea to get some professional advice or education at your place of employment. And that's another reason that employer retirement plans are so important, because people come in and give employees education about their financial futures and their options. When we avail ourselves of those things, retirement can be a much more powerful and productive opportunity.
So you mentioned time, and I'm reminded, I think, of a quote by a famous physicist who said the greatest recognition of humankind wasn't the theory of relativity; it was the effect of compound interest. Yeah. So Art, I know you think a lot about this kind of question, not just of retirement security, financial security generally, but the dignity of work and the threats to work. And since for this section, and I promise you we're going to get to solutions here in a moment, but we're kind of thinking about threats. We're thinking about issues. Yes, we need policy shifts. Yes, we need behavioral change. Yes, we need employer engagement. But at the same time, there are these kind of things going on in the ether, if you will, that are going to affect so many jobs, impact the lives of so many people. You think a lot about this. Talk to us a little bit about those threats.
Yeah, I think they're quite significant, and that's why I'm doing what I'm doing with Working Nation. Really, three motivations that really got me going on this. First one was, and it was the title of the first piece we put up in September 2016 on CNN's platform. It's called Slope of the Curve. The slope of the curve of the change in jobs and skills when measured against time has never been so steep. It is happening so quickly, and there's really so little recognition out there. Yes, I've heard, you go to a conference like this, you hear some panels and you hear some very good discussion, but in the broader mix of people across the country, there's very little understanding. The second motivation that really was driving me and Working Nation is this time it's also about the heart of America. It's about, it's not just about the bottom 20%. And the two examples I've used for 5+ years is one, the driverless vehicle. You're talking about the number one job in 32 states in this country. And I don't know if it's 5 years or 10 or 15 or 20 years, but that middle class job is going to be disappearing in significant numbers. The other example I always use is how a marketing department of 10 will become a marketing department of 2 because of data and analytics. And those 8 jobs disappearing are terrific white-collar, middle-class, and upper-middle-class jobs across this country. The third real motivation, and this is the hardest one because we can think of ways to deal with the other two much more easily. The third motivation really ties in with what we're talking about here. And the way I describe it is, never before have we had to reskill and re-educate all the 48-year-olds. And that is a phenomenon that we're faced with in this country. And it's continue accelerating. So one of the themes that we push forward at Working Nation is the whole idea of lifelong learning. That really is going to be a critical thing that people are going to have to do. I don't care who you are. You're not going into a job for 35 years and not, and then just retiring without having a significant amount of additional education, learning, et cetera. When I speak to K through 12 education conferences, I tell them, look, you don't need me to talk about STEM education. And no, I'm not an educator, so I don't know how to do this. But I think the most important thing you can instill in young people, all young people, not just the strongest in class, is the whole concept of lifelong learning. And I really believe as a society, we've got to be thinking about that, whether you're an employer, whether you're a not-for-profit, whether you're an academic institution or local government. Those types of solution and enhancing the learning. And that will then push off the years of retirement, as opposed to my concern, this group has talked outside of this room, My concern is, are we are we going to be, the title of the panel was is retirement extinct? My concern is retirement going to come at a much earlier age than it has in the past?
So I want to make sure that the audience has time to do some questions, maybe in about 10 minutes, I'm gonna reach out and ask you for your input. So we know we have a lot of challenges. Institutions across society have to change. We need policy changes. We need changes in business. We need changes in personal behaviors. For those of us who can afford lattes, we should stop drinking them. For those of us who can't afford lattes, we should make sure that choice exists. Let's spend maybe 2 minutes each, if we can, on maybe a solution. Do we have an idea? Again, we can't boil the ocean. We can't solve all the problems of the world, certainly in an hour. Do we have a 2 minute each solution? Let's go to Teresa first, and then we'll move across. Teresa.
For a long time, I've had the solution that was inspired by the Lady Garment Workers Union that negotiated a pension plan for their very low-income workers, and the workers loved it. They started early, accumulated pennies per dollar, and had a lifelong retirement income. It was inspired by my pension plan, TIE-CREF. As a professor, I go from job to job, but I always have money in my retirement plan that I can't take out. So from that, not even looking at Norway, but looking at America, my plan is to add a personal account, what Kathleen described, on top of Social Security. Not a privatization of Social Security. Without Social Security, without expanding Social Security, all is lost. But we need that as a base. This would be what we call a guaranteed retirement account, and it is universal. The 63 million American workers now who have no chance to save on the job, and the others who have a K plan or other kind of plan, who employers might want a better, more efficient option, would have it. So we start with 1.5% saved by both the employer and the employee, partnered with a refundable tax credit for that savings. But it's not just accumulation early on. That money has to be invested well, and it has to be invested in a short-term, medium-term, and long-term assets. So we have to stop allowing people to withdraw from what we call retirement savings, and we give tax breaks for retirement savings until retirement. So one solution yesterday we all agreed on, the panelists who are experts said we should stop the ability to withdraw in qualified plans before retirement. It's really simple. But it's not just accumulation, investing well, it's also deaccumulation. So we need to figure out a system to allow people who at 62, 63 can do something with their lump, if they have it, of $20,000, $50,000, $1 million. So we need a deaccumulation plan. The guaranteed retirement account, where I've partnered with a very unlikely partner of me. I'm a professor in a progressive university, with Tony James, who was just the president of Blackstone. We wrote a book called Rescuing Retirement, published by Columbia University Press, which establishes a guaranteed retirement account. Kathleen is communicating that vision from the Economic Policy Institute. We want all Americans to get behind the senators and representatives who will just add on a layer to Social Security, have professional managers invest it well, and then they can deaccumulate either into a higher claim age from Social Security. Social Security is a great annuitizer, or spend it for the rest of their lives. So it's simple. I'm so glad we're not doing health care.
Well, another panel, but a very important issue. So Kathleen, so Teresa's described the account, so I don't want you to re-describe the account. But what I do want you to talk about is, because you got a little bit of personal experience in this matter, in the midst of the political maelstrom. I'm not sure who's polling best today, but we'll find out. Now, do we have 30 in, or how many do we have running around Iowa today? In the midst of all of this, how do we get this broader question of of security for older Americans into
It's a great-
into conversation around dinner
Thank you
tables.
so much. Well, first of all, I want to thank you for
Yeah.
asking Teresa and me to talk about retirement. And I want to thank each of you in the audience for coming because, as we've talked about yesterday, AARP has discovered that there are 3 words that Americans hate, retirement, and planning and aging. So you're very brave to have come to a panel on retirement. Most people, when they hear the word retirement, retreat into a fetal position, which has meant it's been very difficult to get people politically involved. Just to give you an example, there are 10 states who have passed laws on retirement security, including California, including Maryland. I was chair of the task force to do this. And when I was lieutenant governor, we had 50 task forces. I was chair of it, which 200 people would show up on retirement security, which Gallup has showed is the #1 issue that Americans are worried about. 7 people showed up. So I wondered why people would show up on drug addiction, crime, guns. I'm glad you're all laughing. So funny. Anyway, but 7 people, and the reason is because people feel guilty about retirement. If they feel it's their fault, they haven't saved, they haven't done the right thing. All the advertisements says, we will help you, as though it's your doing that you haven't done the right thing. The answer says we need financial education, as though financial education is going to teach somebody how to invest. I mean, it's really hard to know how to invest correctly. So the messages from most people is that it's your fault, you haven't saved right, you haven't earned enough money, and people feel badly about themselves. So as I was saying yesterday, we took a poll funded by the American Federation of Teachers and tested 13 messages, we tested lots of messages, 13 messages didn't work. And what we discovered, and I want all of your help on this, because you are powerful, we need to talk to the presidential candidates about retirements. We would call it peace of mind. We have a slogan, breathe easy, to get them interested in talking about the need to save for retirement, for their later years. We can't even use the word retirement. You can see it's hard to run a campaign if you can't use the word. That you can laugh about.
We're all hunting for a new word.
Yeah, we are looking for a new word. So anyway, what we found is that the message that works the best is a consumer message. You do this, you put your money in here, and when you want to, you can get the money out, it's your money, and you'll have a monthly paycheck for the rest of your life. That's the message that works. We can help you. Now, at this point, I think Senator Brown is taking up this bill. Senator Klobuchar and Senator Coons have taken up another retirement bill. So we are slowly making a difference. And I talked to Eric Swalwell from California, who's also interested. But if you have any friends that are interested in running for president or are members of Congress,
and why not?
Or if you're running for president?
or if you yourself would like to run for president. I've had 4 members of my family run for president, so I know about doing this. Please get them to adopt this. What we've found from our polling, people want an answer. People are eager to have an answer. You can talk about it. I can give you the language to talk about it, and I can give you my email, and I'd love to talk to you. Thank you very much.
You'll find Kathleen afterwards. Thank you, Kathleen. So, Penny, you're. I know a tough act to follow,
No.
but.
So
but
what we're talking about here is
2 minutes of
is a range
solutions.
is a range of solutions, right? So it's probably not going to surprise you that I'm going to go to the personal agency range of solutions, and again channel our clients. The clients that I had as a financial advisor, that clients that 18,000 of our financial advisors have, and I will tell you what they say when we're with them. They will say, I wish my children could hear about this right now. Because if I'd known what you're teaching me and sharing with me and helping me plan for right now, if I'd known this 20 years earlier, I'd be much better off. So it really is. You kind of quipped about financial education, and that's kind of a cliche, but it really is getting perhaps wisdom workers. I'm going to, from y'all's articles, I'm going to go back to our home office. We have all these affinity groups. We have a young professionals group. I'm going to start a wisdom workers group and ask those wisdom workers to share with younger professionals all about personal agency around their financial futures. And we are working programs to help older investors help younger investors. When I used to go into the community rec center and do investing 101 seminars, older investors would bring younger investors. So talking sooner about this, I think, is critically important. I do think that there are policy solutions around employer retirement plans and utilizing the frameworks that we have today around personal IRAs and Roth IRAs. These are very workable solutions, but people need to know about them. They need to have the power to access information in them. And then the third thing that I would suggest is, Teresa used the word deaccumulation. I was sitting in a legislator's office last fall, and they used the word deaccumulation, and he said, I really hate that word. And I said, how about living comfortably in your later years? He said, that's a great term. Maybe we'll ask you to come and speak to Congress about that. I'm like, no, please don't. Use the term, but please don't ask me to do that. But the point is how investors create a paycheck for themselves after the paycheck from their employer is gone. So creating a paycheck for yourself comes from deaccumulation. It comes from solutions that help create a reliable, sustainable income over a life of 15 to 30 to 40 years. And there are private sector solutions that can and should get better. Insurance kinds of solutions, annuitization kinds of solutions that can and should get better, and we need to call on those manufacturers to do a good job of that.
So Art, I see my friend Catherine Collins is sitting in the audience, who does really interesting research on retirement inclinations, both in the United States and across the world. And the reality is that most people, a majority, say that they want to work longer. They don't want to retire at 65, but they also want to work differently. They want flexibility. They want transitional retirements. They want more opportunity to do new things, to redefine their work around mentorship and around helping younger workers, et cetera. So you've identified this very significant challenge and risk of the risks of AI, of technology, of increasing consolidation, globalization, et cetera. In 2 minutes or a minute and a half, do you have one idea for us about ways to address these challenges?
Well, you just actually used the word that I was going to use, which I think is one of the most important things we can do in this country for many reasons, including for the benefit of these older people, and that is use the word mentorship. I think as you look across society, and whether it's the youngest members of society, broken homes, or even intact homes, but the world is changing so quickly that older people who've gone through decades of experience really can bring a tremendous amount to the table. And there are organizations out there that do this type of thing, but I think one of the most important things we could do is really, as a society, think more and more about how to engage older people in, and as I said, I'll use the word you use, mentoring and engagement, and not just younger people, but also those people who are 48 and are all of a sudden hitting a point in time in life, or 35. I think that's one of the most important themes that we should be pushing out there. And that's not something you do at a federal government level. I really believe that's done at a much more local level. And our mechanism, as I referred to before at Working Nation, is using all kinds of media. In today's world, you can, to educate people across the country upon themes that otherwise you couldn't. So that's that's top of my list. The other, I'll just add one more thing. A primary investment area of mine is in the area of education and training related technology. I actually got my first investment was in '02. A guy named Milken called me up and said, Art, I'd like you to invest in this online education company. I was already thinking about education and technology because my kids were going to the finest private schools in LA, and 5 miles down the road it could be a very different situation. Anyway, I met with the founders and all, and I finally told Mike, I said, yes, I will, but only if I can go on the board and on the executive committee, because I have no idea if I'm going to make any money, but I want to learn about this. Anyway, that has been a primary area that I've invested in and continue. And in today's world of augmented reality and virtual reality, these are things that can allow older people, well, all people, but older people to learn much more in terms of skills and on a continuing basis. So that's my one other thing I'd mention.
So I'm having trouble seeing the audience, but I want to go out to you. If does anybody have any questions, comments, reactions to any of this? We can certainly continue the conversation. I think that here's a question over here. I think that we have a mic floating around. Gentleman in the second row, who we know, yeah.
Hi, Rick McGay from the New School. It's been a great conversation, and there's a wide range of issues, not just about the finances, but about meaningful life in retirement. But I did want to ask a finance question, because I think Penny said we have a set of tools that are out there now that just aren't used enough. So I guess the question is, is it just a matter of not participating in the existing tools, or is there something more that we need that our existing toolkit doesn't provide?
Yeah, so the existing toolkit, for example, includes IRA mechanisms, personal IRA and Roth IRA mechanisms. Right now, those mechanisms are set up that you have to begin withdrawing funds at 70 and a half. Well, there are many people who are working with purpose or working because they have to, and they're being forced to withdraw from those tools. That really doesn't make a lot of sense. So we're talking to legislators about bills that are before Congress right now that lengthen the amount of time in which those assets can continue to accumulate. Things like that are just like Social Security, that was set up at a time when life expectancy was quite different. Those rules were set up at a time when working lives and life expectancy were quite different. So altering those mechanisms is one way to handle that.
Kathleen?
Yeah, yes, I think we need a new product, because right now people who have pensions can invest in private equity, private credit, in a range of alternatives at very low fees, because you can have large numbers of people invest in those fees. And people who have family offices have enough money, and they can invest in real estate that's not going to come for a long period of time. So they have a lot more flexibility as to what they can invest. Most Americans can only invest in IRAs or 401ks, and which means they have basically daily liquidity. And so, and as you know, how many Americans take money out of their 401ks?
High percentage.
Okay, a high percentage, right? Which is what Teresa was getting at earlier. So they are taking money out, which means that they can't invest in the best long-term investments. And if you had heard some of the panels in another panel about how I think Cal Pers was saying they were going to put a lot of money in private equity because they're going to get better returns in private equity. So I think there are a lot of Americans who should have the opportunity to invest in a range of investments in which that money can be patient for 40 years. It's supposed to be retirement money. Why do they need daily liquidity? Did I make sense to you?
Yep.
It makes a lot of sense. It really does, from an investment standpoint, it doesn't make much sense to have 40-year money invested in cash.
Yeah.
401k and IRA money can be invested long term, but often it takes a certain amount of education in order to know how to do that, to your earlier
yeah,
point.
so that's
why
the
mechanisms are there.
Well, my view is why you don't, so if you're a government employee, if you're a janitor and you work as a government employee, you don't need any education. It's done for you. And then when you retire, you get a monthly paycheck. So we're trying to set up a system that says there are a lot of Americans who don't want so much education. Or they're a like my daughter, I'm just going to boast, she's going to graduate from med school in 2 weeks. Oh, thank you, Kathleen. So she wants to focus on being a doctor. She doesn't want to focus on where her investments are. That takes, to be that educated is really difficult.
So
And
more
I-
automatic mechanisms.
So I,
right?
thank you.
Agree.
So that's what Teresa, I mean, I know I'm stealing what you should be talking about, Teresa, so go right ahead and
No,
explain what you're talking
Penny, think bold. That proposal affects a very small number of people. The idea that they can extend the time at which they can withdraw from their IRA because they're working. Once you talk about that group, they're at the very top. They have money and they're working. So think bold.
Middle class. We're talking about middle class. Yeah, we
No,
are.
all right. Anyway, think bold.
Okay.
Think bold. All the people that don't have anything, a universal plan, automatic investment. Okay.
Let's take another question. A woman in the front row, and then a woman in the second row.
'Cause that's all we can see.
Hi, I'm Linnea McCart. I work as a banker, and I'd like to also put forth that there is a very large issue for millennials with student loan debt. And so I'm excited to hear that they want to save starting at 22, but I know that there are so many who are doing all the right things to get all the big jobs who are burdened with like $200,000 of student loan debt by the time they come out of graduate school. And I'm wondering how corporations and, you know, if there can be some save-up programs or debt pay-down programs out there that can help out all of those students as well. I think that may be a tremendous barrier to starting early on the 401k contributions,
Yeah.
even if they're at a company that offers it.
Anybody want to
hear
take?
ya.
Anybody want to take it?
That's another panel altogether,
it sure is.
right? It really is an issue that we have to deal with. And Art, to your point about lifelong learners, are those students with that debt set up to be lifelong learners, or are they set up to just have a ton of debt? But it is a goal that many of our millennial clients are adding to the checklist.
Art had a quick.
Let me
point.
make just a quick comment here, and again, it's a focus of ours at Working Nation. Experts, I'm not one of them, but experts will tell you that 25% of the four-year colleges and universities in this country will close within the next 10 years. And it's a combination of what you're talking about, massive amounts of debt as a result of the cost structure, and coming out the other side, the employability issues. And so one of the areas that we emphasize at Working Nation is much more education that's guided for employment-type purposes. I'm not talking about the people at Harvard or Yale or wherever your daughter's going to med school, but one of the story areas that we've told quite often, probably half a dozen times, are really interesting community college efforts where corporations are partnering with them to construct curriculum that leads to more enhanced employability. So yeah, the debt problem is a major problem, but I think you're going to see some significant changes over the next 10 and 20 years.
And the other side of that is parents are eating into their retirement accounts in order to send their kids to these schools that they're going to come out with a lot of debt. So it's hitting multiple generations.
And we have to think about whether universities should invest their time and resources in rock climbing walls and smoothie bars, or in services and supports for students and faculty. Catherine.
Okay. Hi, I'm Catherine Collinson. And a question for all of you, and thank you for asking the millennial student debt question. And this sort of leads to an even bigger question, that we hear the term financial wellness a lot these days. And in this panel, we've heard a lot about saving for retirement, how we can do a better job of helping people save, but it also seems like we need to look at the other side of the balance sheet, because many people are facing debt that are credit card debt or other types of debt, or lack emergency savings. So what I'd like is your thoughts in terms of solutions, how we build those components in so that as people are saving for retirement, they can address their other shorter term needs as well.
Penny, looks like you have.
It's a balancing act, and so we share with our clients there are three things we're going to talk about the first time that we get together: your emergency fund, your retirement, what that looks like to you, and how you're going to protect whatever plan we put in place. So financial well-being, wellness it's comprehensive. It's not one thing or another, and there's a certain amount of financial hygiene that goes with that. Part of it is delaying gratification. Part of it is getting out of debt if you are in debt, and balancing that with some amount of savings early on, because the earlier you begin saving, the magic of compounding is going to go to work for you. It's complicated.
As are all these questions. So I would just commend all of us to have a bigger conversation about getting old and about this question of retirement security, to encourage it at our dinner tables,
Becoming wiser.
in our political groups. We could keep going for another hour. I could just keep going for another hour with Kathleen alone. But unfortunately,
I'm not going to.
We're out of time. We're out of time for our panel. So please join me in thanking Penny Pennington, Kathleen Kennedy, Teresa Gillaraducci, and our
Good to be with you.
Thanks so much.
I didn't realize you're the head.